All right, everybody, welcome back to another edition of Gary's Record Collection. This time we're going to look at a record that only a certain audience knows about, and I'm talking about real record collectors who deal in what we call bootleg records. These are recordings of live concerts. So if you're the average fan and you're, let's say, because we're going to look at a Led Zeppelin bootleg today, you're a Led Zeppelin fan, you know the albums 1, 2, 3, 4, Houses Are Holy, Physical Graffiti, Presence, In Through the Outdoor, Coda, and the live album, The Song Remains the Same. But beyond that set of albums, there are a ton of illegal, illicit records that were put out starting in the early 70s. Live on Blueberry Hill was one of the first. Mudslide was another from a Vancouver concert. Today, we're going to look at a concert, a bootleg that is iconic because it was a soundboard recording that escaped from the clutches of Led Zeppelin. And of course, I'm talking about Destroyer. Destroyer was a concert in Cleveland, April 27th, 1977. Now let's set the stage here right now. So up until that point, there was only one live album, The Song Remains the Same, and that was a concert from July of 1973 in New York. And you saw the film and you had the album. And if that was all you saw, that's all you knew about Led Zeppelin live is what they did in that movie. Possibly you may have heard some of the BBC sessions on radios. Those were made into specials that were played on US radio stations, like on Westwood One Superstar Rock Concert Series later in the 80s. The King Biscuit Flower Hour sometimes would do that. And what they did is they took BBC recordings. There was a concert in 1969 at the Playhouse Theatre, and then another concert at the Paris Theatre in 1971 that got widespread radio play, although it was never officially released on an album until 1998 when BBC Sessions was put out. So you had no soundboard recordings. You had these audience recordings of Led Zeppelin. Somebody was out in the audience, and they held up a microphone, they held up their recorder or whatever, and got a very boomy, very audience sounding recording. So here comes Destroyer. Destroyer comes out of nowhere in 1982. And it's obviously a soundboard recording from April 27th, 1977. And the story goes that whoever was doing video production at the Kingdome in Seattle, Led Zeppelin was going to play there in July of 77. And they wanted to get an idea of how the concert goes. What are the songs? What are the important cues that I need to know as a video director? What are they going to do? What are they going to play? Are they going to be in a certain position? What are these cues that I need to listen to as a director? So, guy out in Seattle calls his friend in Cleveland. It's like, hey man, I'm doing the show in Seattle. Can you get me a recording of a Zeppelin concert so I can study it? Guy says yes, goes in apparently with the cooperation of the band, goes into the arena, plugs it into the board, and records his version of the concert, ships it off to Seattle. The guy studies it. The Seattle video is actually out online. You can watch it. And so knowing where all of those musical cues come in, they can be ready for camera moves and taking transitions and things like that. So here comes this tape. Now this tape got out and started to get duplicated and eventually wound up on vinyl. And the first release of it was actually not even the picture that you see in the corner. It was this thing. This is Led Zeppelin Destroyer. This is what they call the European release. This was put out and is a beautiful set. It has Jimmy Page on the cover. This is from the program from Earl's Court, the picture is. So that was the first thing that came out. That was the European release. And then that was followed by the American release, which here's the picture that you see in the corner. And interestingly enough, there are problems with the recording where during the middle of one song, another song plays. And it was like somebody was dubbing it and it was incorrect. Another version of that came out, this time with more of a rainbowish cover. Okay, I like the blue and red one better. Later in 1990, Swingin' Pig in Luxembourg put out their own version of Destroyer with another picture of Jimmy Page on the cover. This one from 1980, concert on the European tour. I actually found out about this concert when I started collecting records in the late 80s, and I got on a title called Sweet Jelly Roll. And this is actually a better version. This is not the exact same tape that was put out by on the original sets. It doesn't have the errors in the songs, and the song order is a little bit different. It's all there, but it's a little bit different. So this is Sweet Jelly Roll. Now, but the coolest thing, and I saved for last, was, remember we had the European version and we had the American version with the picture you see here. Well, the coolest version that came out was this thing, which is a carrying case, and it has, you open it up, let's see if we can do this without completely destroying everything. All right, you open it up, and the records are actually in here. So like this carrying case, God knows where they got it and why they did it, but they did it. And so now you have the Led Zeppelin Destroyer carrying case, which is worth a lot of money on eBay. It is hard to find those for like under $300, under $400 these days. So those are the releases. Let's get to the music. The music is the coolest thing. So like I said, if you weren't familiar with Led Zeppelin in concert through 1977, all you knew was The Song Remains the Same, and they started with rock and roll, and then went to Black Celebration Day, Black Dog. Here's what they started with in Cleveland.
Anything I wanted to know, any place I needed.
The Song Remains the Same, and unfortunately the beginning is cut on this recording, so hopefully there's another tape out there somewhere that'll come out one day that has The Song Remains the Same full. So, but it was a revelation. It was brought in. Sick Again was the song that came after that. Usually it was the Rain song after Song Remains the Same, but they changed it up. Can't say I blame them. Another great song on Destroyer was 10 Years Gone. This came off Physical Graffiti's the 1975 album. And it's just a beautiful song. Let's take a listen real quick to some of it.
Changes fill my time, but baby, that's alright with me. In the midst I think of you and how it used to be. Oh baby, darling, hey.
I'm going to skip ahead here. Funny thing about this particular song is I used to use this upcoming sequence to test the bass in my car. So listen to some of this. This is John Paul Jones on bass pedals. What a great song. And then after 10 Years Gone, they went into an acoustic set, believe it or not. First time they had done acoustic material since 71 or 72. They did the Battle of Evermore, Going to California, Black Country Woman, Barnyard Stomp. And then everybody left the stage. Everybody was up on stage in the front of the stage, and then everybody left except for Jimmy Page. He sat down and started playing an old Yardbirds song called White Summer, and Led Zeppelin played that in the early days too, in 1969 and 1970. So if you remember on Led Zeppelin 1, Black Mountain Side was on there, and it was followed immediately by Communication Breakdown. So now let's imagine you're sitting there in the Richfield Coliseum, you're watching this, and you hear Black Mountain Side. So what do you expect is going to be next? Well, obviously Communication Breakdown, because it's on the album. So let's take a listen. They're playing Kashmir. This is not Communication Breakdown. This is awesome. Thing was different too. John Bonham did that little and it was like the sudden stop in the middle of that descending riff, and you don't hear that on the studio version on Physical Graffiti. So in other audience recordings, by the way, when they hit Kashmir, nobody was expecting it, and you can't hear it in the soundboard recording, but audience recordings, the crowd goes nuts. They lose their minds. And then after about 48, 50 seconds into it, after Robert Plant sings All Will Be Revealed and they start the descending part, the crowd goes nuts again. And why is that? Because there's a giant mirrored ball at the top of the arena, and they hit it with spotlights. And so now the arena is just bathed in these like spots going all around, and people just lost their minds. It's 77. They lost their minds for everything. But what an incredible effect, and just playing the audience, that was amazing. So after Kashmir, here comes, it's time for a little bit of drumming. It's John Bonham.
Coming in at 120 pounds, John Bonham over the top.
Over the top? Just sweet there. Bum, 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 bum. So they played Out on the Tiles into Moby Dick. So after the Out on the Tiles intro with no vocals, John Bonham goes into his solos, plays with sticks, plays with his hand, comes back with that phase drumming, and then they end it with the actual Moby Dick theme. After that, it's time for another solo standout, and it's Jimmy Page's turn this time. Now, in 77, they decided not to play Dazed and Confused, which was the first time they hadn't played it ever. They played it all the way up through their 1975 concerts. But Page still wanted to do his solo piece because he's got that violin bow, and, you know, if you've got the bow, you've got to use it, right? So he did a Theremin solo to begin. The Theremin is an electronic oscillator, basically, and you've seen it in The Song Remains the Same during Whole Lotta Love. That's that box that has the antenna on it. You put your hand next to it and goes, woo, right? So he's got that all ready to go. And unbeknownst to the crowd, so in The Song Remains the Same, he's hitting when he has the bow, he's hitting the guitar and it goes bump, 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 bump. And they mixed it so you would hear that first bump would be left and right channel, and then they would move it off to the side. Bump, 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 like that. So you can't do that in concert, right? Well, guess what? Here we go. Let's check this out. And I'll put the left-right meter on so you can see how it plays. And the best part is, I'll tell you after we listen to a little bit of this. And you can hear the crowd going nuts. Even in the soundboard recording, you can hear that crowd underneath. And they're going nuts because what happened was the guy at the soundboard in the middle of the stadium, he's sitting there twiddling a knob, making that thing go left and right. And because it's a gigantic stadium, they've got it wired for stereo. So it's going from one side all the way over to the other and back and forth. And people are sitting there going, what is going on? How is he doing this? And Page is the showman. He's sitting there he hits the thing to make it start going, hits the Echoplex, which just repeats the sound. And he's out there in the middle of the stage just waving his hands, making it look like he's doing the cool thing. And then, of course, he brings up the bow. And it's time for him to do a little bit more of the left and right effects. Let's listen to a little bit more of it. That's great. It's just back and forth, and it's just messing up with the audience, making them just think about stuff. So absolutely cool. Then we go to coming out of the guitar solo. So we don't have Dazed and Confused. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to play this little hit off of the album they were actually touring on, which was Presence. They played Nobody's Fault But Mine in the beginning, and then they played this coming out of the solo.
When they told us we should go.
Cool story about Achilles Last Stand was because Page had done this whole guitar army thing on Presence. He had multiple guitars layered on top of each other. He's like, how am I going to be able to do this in concert? And he just gets the Les Paul out and starts hammering it. And actually, just with the single neck, he didn't even need the double neck. He used the single neck guitar. Sounded great. And they played it faster than on the album, which really gets the juices going. This is a great song, by the way, to be out while you're driving. Just make sure there's no cops around because you'll be lead-footing it for sure. Oh, pun intended, I'm sure. So the concert goes on, followed by Stairway to Heaven, everybody's favorite. Encores, Rock and Roll, and Trampled Underfoot. And this changed it through the tour, but this is the early part of the tour in 77. So it was Rock and Roll and then Trampled Underfoot. Later, they did a little bit. They brought in Whole Lotta Love, but just like the first 8 bars. So it was just like a taste of it, and then that went into Rock and Roll. And there was a few shows where they played It'll Be Me, the Jerry Lee Lewis standard. There was one where they instead of Rock and Roll, they went Whole Lotta Love to Communication Breakdown. So all in all, it was like a 2.5. This concert was 2 hours and 40 minutes long. Some of them got up into 3 hours, the time frame. Now, back in 2022, big news in the Led Zeppelin community. Somebody unearthed an 8mm film of this concert. It was like after 45 years, it's like, oh, by the way, we have some video. Check this out. This is. And they went through and synced it up to include the music from the soundboard recording. So you've got a great piece of 8mm film that they used. It looks like they used AI on it to enhance it and clean it up and make it less shaky and things like that. But there's Led Zeppelin in concert. That had to have been just amazing to see that. And I want to bring this full screen because there's a funny part of this that you would never hear about on the record. And I talked about the acoustic set earlier. So they did the Battle of Evermore and Going to California. Battle of Evermore, John Bonham sat on the front row and was playing tambourine. And Going to California, I believe he stepped off. And then all of a sudden, it's like, it's time to play the next song. So we're going to get ready here. So let me scroll this forward and get this full screen for you. Wait, what was that? Did you see that? That was John Bonham running onto his drum kit. He was in the back and he nearly missed his cue. We're going to play that again. Watch in the top left corner. And John Paul Jones laughs his head off when he comes through. Oh, that's great. Let's just zip ahead and I'll show you a little bit more of this. Here's Achilles' Last Stand from that show. Look at it. It just must have been just incredible to be there. So that is Led Zeppelin Destroyer Live in Cleveland, April 27th, 1977. Like I said in the beginning, copies of this are very expensive on eBay. They're out there, but you will be paying top dollar for that. Don't expect to pay anything less, certainly nothing less than $100 for a 4-record set. The entire tape is out there on YouTube. You can listen to the entire show too, so don't let that stop you. My conspiracy theory that I will float is, remember I told you in the beginning about how the guy came in, plugged into the board and made his own copy and sent out to Seattle. Well, a lot of the soundboard recordings that have come out in the last few years from this tour were made by the sound people, Shoko Sound, who were running the lights and the sound for the show. And their recordings sound different. And I wonder if Shoko had a tape going of their own as well as this guy. And if so, did Shoko start recording right before The Song Remains the Same started, which they did on all of their other tapes? Did they capture the stuff that was missing on this tape because of tape flips? We don't know. We're going to have to wait and see if that tape ever comes out, if it exists in the first place. Hope you like this edition of Gary's Record Collection. We will have more. Thanks for watching.